Unfortunately, women being disinterested in sex after marriage and withholding sex is part of what women do in marriage. Hello, I'm Karen Seitz, and this is the Happy Wife School. This podcast is for married women to realize that we are responsible for our happiness, that no one and no thing can make us happy, and that our husbands are not the source of our unhappiness. In each episode, I red pill married women to know that we are the problem in our marriages to good men. For the good men, this podcast will wake you up to the realities of your wife's woman ways, to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to her emasculation in a constructive, caring way. Before we dive into today's episode, a couple reminders. My message is meant for common and usual marital issues. My podcast is not intended for abusive, violent, or compulsive behaviors in a marriage that are threatening or dangerous. Also, please take a second to visit my website and learn more about my courses, which offer solutions for married women and good men. You can find the link in the description below. With all that being said, let's get started. What we're talking about today in our Q&A, what to do when your wife doesn't want sex. 3 different scenarios. So I have 3 different questions that will use some common themes throughout each of them. And a reminder, when I do my Q&As, I'm using these questions as what I like to call talking points of discussion that help to elaborate on the different concepts and principles that I teach on the Happy Wife School. These are all questions from 3 different men whose wives have stopped wanting sex. I've not talked to these men. I don't know the ins and outs of their marriage. I haven't talked to their wives. So we're just using the questions as a jumping off point to elaborate again on some concepts and principles I teach, and a reminder that my channel is for women, because all women, whether we want to realize it or not, all women on a spectrum have these woman ways and issues and hangups in us that we bring into a marriage with a good man. So my channel is for women married to good men, because on a spectrum as women, we all have these issues, and we are mostly married to good men, and our woman ways are what drive the problems in the relationship. So as women, we are the problem, and therefore we are empowered to be the solution. And then the channel is also for good men married to women who struggle with these dynamics that I talk about. My message is not for physically abusive relationships or highly dysfunctional relationships. My message is not appropriate in those dynamics. And if that is you and you are listening, you want to seek the help of a trained professional, a licensed counselor who specializes in abusive relationships. So with that being said, let's jump into the first question. So number 1, since most married women don't want sex, couldn't they at least give their husband a BJ or a hand job? I'd like to see you make a video on that. And my question is should husbands ask for these? So really good question. And very, very, very reasonable. So just answering the question right off the bat, yes, of course, it is very reasonable that if your wife is disinterested in sex, it is very reasonable to ask her and try to have a conversation of, this is still something that's important to me, and would you be willing to compromise to give me a BJ or a hand job? It's very, very reasonable. And we're going to talk about compromise a little bit later in the episode today. But right off the bat, yes, it is very, very reasonable. The problem is in most women not wanting sex, the angle I'd like to take here in talking to the men, and a constant message on the channel, is unfortunately women being disinterested in sex after marriage and withholding sex is part of what women do in marriage, again, on a spectrum. So it's important for good men to remember, as I often say, you did not get the wrong wife, you married a woman. And unfortunately, if your wife isn't willing to compromise and do other sexual acts if she is not interested in sexual intercourse and isn't willing to meet you on common ground and do other things in the bedroom, then you want to know there's not much you can do to get her to change that and get her to re-engage or get her to be willing to do other sexual acts like a hand job or a BJ. And that's the unfortunate reality of marriage and how women show up. And the difficult part for a good man, and I see these comments all the time on my videos, is oftentimes a man will comment and says, if your wife has started withholding sex, you need to leave. It's over. Run. Get out of the marriage. Unfortunately, that's really bad advice. Or not, I guess not unfortunately. It's just really bad advice because it's not a good man's nature. For some good men, yes, they are recognizing based on their values that they don't want to stay in a marriage or a relationship where their wife is withholding sex or treating them poorly in other ways that we use in manipulating and emasculating good men. And they might make a plan to leave because they value not being in a relationship where they're treated that way and they don't have higher values, meaning more important values to them, such as maybe religion or faith, or they might not have children, or they might believe and value that it's better for the children not to keep the marriage together. And that's very, very reasonable. But the truth is, and what I most experience in talking with good men and reading through your comments on the channel, that leaving isn't an option because you take your vows seriously or your values and priorities. What's most important to you is honoring your vows based on your faith or your religion, or that you have children and you value and your highest priority is keeping the family and marriage together for your kids' sake. And that's what's important to you, which is also very reasonable. That's why I don't tell men whether you should get a divorce or not, unless it's very, very clear cut. A good man is young. He's newly married. They don't have kids. He doesn't have the framework of his faith or religion keeping him from getting a divorce. I will say, hey, if a woman is on the high end spectrum of the woman ways and it's going in a very destructive direction, I will say it'd be good to plan to get a divorce if that's within your values, and that's that one exception. But in general, I don't give advice to good men on whether they should stay or go because it is a personal choice based on your values, based on what's important to you and your priorities in life, and only you can know that. And there is no right or wrong in what your values are. It's why if a good man is making a plan to leave his marriage because that's within his values and what he needs to do for himself and asks for my help, I will support him in that. Or if he is going to stay and has a wife who's not going to change and he's staying based on his kids or his religion, I support him in that. Most common is men fall and they are going to stay because their values align most with staying. So for good men who have wives who have stopped having sex, are not interested in sex, are not willing to compromise and do other sexual acts to make their husbands important and show a willingness to work with them in that way, a good man is still going to stay. And the advice from different men or either the manosphere of you just need to get out, it's over, I need to run, that's not good advice to a lot of good men because that's not what they're going to do. So what good men have to be able to do is to accept the reality. If your wife has withdrawn from sex and she's not willing to do other things in the bedroom to prioritize you in that way, you have to take responsibility for your choice that you're choosing to stay. Otherwise, you will be a victim to her withholding of sex and it will continue to crush you. When you focus on, I'm the one choosing to stay and I know why I'm choosing to stay, then you take responsibility and you can start to give to yourself in a way to recharge and be there for yourself and rebuild your own strength and confidence so you don't allow your wife withholding sex to crush you and weaken you any longer. And there's nothing you can do to make her re-engage or make her do other acts in the bedroom So it's accepting this is my choice and how do I navigate it the best I can and embrace my wife as my greatest teacher to overcome the weaknesses in me and build my strength and confidence so she no longer has the power over me in this regard. And I'm not saying that's an easy path. It is a embrace the suck path. But when you take responsibility for your choice and you use it to strengthen yourself, that's how you manage and navigate the relationship if your wife is not willing to budge and isn't going to re-engage in any way in the bedroom. I want to talk to the women a little bit in this as well, that if you're a woman watching and you're not here to throw stones or are upset by the message, but you're here trying to learn and you are open-minded and recognize through what I talk about on the channel that you do withhold sex and that's not the woman you want to be, and you realize I have shut down to sex. I know it's not healthy for me in that or my marriage or my husband, and you're working to open back up and step back in, then a BJ or a hand job is a really, really good stepping stone to re-engage in the bedroom. Because what happens for us as women, and as a woman who was shut down to sex for a period of time in my marriage, trying to re-engage and have regular sex and open up to it is an overwhelming step to take when you look at the whole picture all at once, which works against us when we get overwhelmed by that and we're telling, okay, I've got to open back up, so I need to re-engage this much and I need to do all these things that I stopped doing in the bedroom with my husband. What we do to ourselves in that is overwhelm and effectively shut ourselves down to sex even more. So doing other sexual acts in the bedroom is a good stepping stone to re-engage, to minimize the pressure and overwhelm you're putting on yourself, and your husband, as a good man, will be appreciative that you're taking steps to re-engage. You will actually find that you enjoy those acts and that it can make it fun again in the bedroom, and they're not scary. So they're a good stepping stone. Also, to women who are still having sex, but have maybe gotten rigid and stopped exploring in the bedroom or stopped doing things maybe you did when you were dating, it's good to know and hope that women can know that your husband still likes other sexual acts like a BJ or a hand job. It's something he appreciates and is fun. And if we slow down and we're honest with ourselves, we enjoy those things too. And not to be too crude using the statement I use sometimes in talking about sex, but it's a good way to take the stick out and have some fun and get outside your comfort zone, because as women, we get into a huge comfort zone around sex and stop exploring, stop doing other things in the bedroom, and again, become very rigid and might only know we can do it this way and this way only. That's not very much fun for us or for our husbands, and it's very, very, very limiting view. So it's good to open back up and explore a little or re-engage with things you used to do, maybe when you were dating, and have fun in that again. And your husband will really appreciate that. So that's the message I wanted to give to women in that question as well. So to summarize that one, or to wrap it up, of course, it's reasonable if your wife isn't interested in sexual intercourse. Of course, it's reasonable to ask her for other sexual acts like a BJ or hand job. But if she's shut down to sex, it's unlikely she's going to be willing to do those acts too. And then it's a matter of, if you're choosing to stay, you have to take responsibility for your choice to stay and navigate the relationship the best you can, given that you're experiencing, unfortunately and very sadly, just a very common reality of marriage between a woman and a good man. And to the women, to open up and have fun again and not make these acts or sex a big deal, that it's just part of a marriage and something nice that you get to share with your husband that happens to be very important to him and is part of how he feels loved in the relationship. And as a good man will lay the moon and stars at your feet and be so thrilled with you as a wife if you can open up and re-engage and have regular sex in your marriage, and maybe throw some other fun things in there as well from time to time. So, all right. So I'm going to get into the second question, which is a little similar, but a little bit different of a topic, and interesting where we'll go with this one. So the next question, I just wonder if you have ever addressed her time of the month in intimacy. I would give our sex life a B-, but she often forgets that even though it's her monthly cycle and she can't have sex, I still have some need for release. Am I being too sensitive or selfish during that time? So good and interesting question. And to me, it stands out that this is a good man asking this question, because he's wondering, and the question being, am I being too sensitive or am I being too selfish during this time? And he's really wanting to know. So that's a good man. And the answer to this question is, it's reasonable as a woman that during that time of month that we are not interested in having sex. That's very reasonable. And it's also very reasonable that during that time, again, kind of coming off of the last question as well, but it's reasonable you ask for another sexual act during that time, like a hand job or a BJ, while she is on her period. And that's not being insensitive or selfish, but also taking into consideration that it's reasonable your wife doesn't want to have sex during that time of the month. And also recognizing that if it's clear from your question that your wife is engaging in regular sex with you, and that the problem comes up during just that time of month, and to recognize, based on the reality of marriage and what good men suffer in of not having regular sex with their wives, and many good men being in sexless marriages, that you're very fortunate and very blessed that your wife engages in sex regularly, and they even have a B- sex life. That I know there's many men listening saying, gosh, if my wife, that was the only time of the month that my wife wasn't interested, that would be great. However, that's just not the common experience for good men. And to the women, we do use our time of the month as an excuse to have a break from sex. And many women look forward to that time of, then I don't have to have sex. But again, the goal and what I teach is we actually want to learn to enjoy sex as women, and know that that is something that's very important to our husbands, that shows them we care about them, we love them, and we're thinking about them and the things that are important to them. Because I think that we really take for granted when we're married to a good man, and speaking from my own experience, and just have a little bit to feel in that. So thank you for allowing me to be vulnerable always. That good men do so many things. My husband does so many things because he knows it's important to me. Or even if it's not necessarily something that's important to me, my husband is so thoughtful, and constantly putting me first and my wants or desires before his own. And that is a cornerstone and trademark of a good man. And so I often encourage women to slow down and ask yourself, how much does your husband do because he's thinking of you and trying to put you first, doing the things that are important to you? And if you're honest with yourself, you will have a very long list. And good men don't ask for much or expect much in return. And so sex is something that's really important to a good man in a marriage. And to me, it's like, one, let's learn to enjoy it for ourselves, ladies. And two, it's not asking too much at all. And it's a really simple, nice, pleasurable way to give back and show them that we care. So when it comes to our monthly cycle, if we're just abandoning sex all together and putting our blinders on and just don't even, like, nope, not even an option. Don't even think about it. Let's not talk about it. See you in a week or two. What that actually says to a good man is that sex isn't important to us. He's not important to us, and we're not thinking of it. So it's good to acknowledge it, and good for our character and integrity of follow through as women to say, don't feel like intercourse, but can I do something else for you? And to be engaged and enthusiastic about that is a nice way to feel good about ourselves and show our husbands, hey, I'm thinking about you and you're important to me and I love you. That's the message it sends versus when we just off the table, don't think about it, don't talk about it. And he's like, well, I guess we'll just, we're going to wait a week or two, and then they get the message it's not important to us and we don't care. So just it's something to think about in this unique niche category of talking about sex in marriage and not using it as an excuse to take a break. And you'll feel better staying engaged to a level than just abandoning it altogether because you're following through with your commitment and still considering and thinking of your husband. So in this question, kind of breaking away from the core of the question, but just an interesting topic that it brings up to be able to talk about is compromise. That, again, I think it's fair and reasonable that a woman not want to have sex on her cycle, but I think it's fair and reasonable to do other sexual acts to please your husband, to show him you care and give him that opportunity for release and for him to feel important in the marriage, which is how a good man looks at it. If a good man's listening and is brave and courageous to bring this topic to his wife and suggest a compromise, and your wife says no, it means she's not willing to compromise. She's not a woman who's willing to compromise with you, especially in the bedroom. And so the question is, why? Why as women are we so unwilling to compromise? Whereas good men like compromise because it's part of problem solving and getting to a solution. And a good man doesn't want his way in the marriage. A good man says, hey, okay, well, I can understand you're feeling this way. This is how I feel. Let's work together and find a compromise. And that's a good man's nature. And he's very, very open to that. So why are we so unwilling to compromise as women? And it really comes down to our selfishness as women and only thinking of ourselves and what's important to us or what's off the table and what's off limits because of what's going on for us or what we are feeling. It's really our selfishness that we're so unwilling to compromise. And another angle in this is, and where our selfishness comes in the bedroom and with sex, is really the different wiring between us as women and good men. That as women, our wiring and thinking around sex is that sex is supposed to make us feel loved. Women believe and live in a framework that sex is supposed to make us feel loved. The problem with that and our thinking as women is we don't love ourselves. We don't love ourselves. And that's very clear in how we feel about ourselves internally, how critical we are of ourselves, how easily we burn ourselves out and put ourselves at the bottom of the list and get so busy in our lives and so overcommitted that there's no room for us, there's no room for our husbands. And those are all windows into really how as women we don't love ourselves and don't really even know what that means. But the problem is, as women, we really truly don't love ourselves. So nothing can make us feel loved. It really is true. The old saying, if you can't love yourself, you can't love anyone else. Well, it also means if I don't love myself, I can't feel loved by another. Even if they do love me, we don't feel it because we don't have that within ourselves. So of course then, sex doesn't make us feel loved. And living in camp victim as women, We blame our husbands for not making us feel loved and cared for in sex. So why would we want to have it? If we don't feel loved within sex, why would we compromise with our husbands on our time of the month or in other regards with sex in the bedroom? You don't make me feel loved in that. I don't want it. Why would I give it to you if it's important to you? Well, you don't make me feel loved in it. Whereas men see sex as an expression of love in a marriage, a relationship. Good men see sex as an expression of love in a relationship. So a good man thinks, why wouldn't the woman I love want to make love with me and share that together and have sex and express our love? And all that time in dating and before getting married, we had sex, and maybe a lot of it. And a good man thinks, she loves me. We're having sex and a lot of sex. She loves me. But as I talk about, it was a tool to get the man in the relationship. So then we stop having it. One, because we got the relationship, but also we don't feel loved. And we live in camp victim and think our husbands is the reason that we don't feel loved. So why would we have sex? And it's another way we miss each other and think so differently as women and men about sex and love. So we don't compromise. So to the women, if you realize you're withholding sex, again, and it's not who you want to be, learn to compromise. It's understandable. And for some men I have seen through the comments really struggle to accept this, but it is just totally true that we are wired very, very differently as women and men. We think differently. We think about sex differently. Different things are important to us. That's why I try to share with men, your wife's never going to think and operate and relate to sex like you as a man. It's okay. But that's why we want to come together, and that's where the dance comes in. Come together to meet each other in our differences and work through them and find what we would hope we could find in a marriage is compromise. Finding compromise. So ladies, it's understandable. You might not be in the mood all the time like your husband. That's okay. We're not wired that way. We're not. Say that you're fine with once a month. Having sex once a month would work for me. And your husband would like it once a week. A compromise might be having sex once a month and saying to your husband in a genuine way and saying, I understand this is important to you. It's not as important to me, but I could have sex once a month. Could we compromise and come together in that agreement? And then maybe the other weeks, can I give you a BJ or a hand job? That would be a good compromise. Of course, a good man's going to prefer intercourse, but a good man is open to compromise. And if presented fairly and genuinely, he will consider that. So again, I think it's also fair to find a compromise in the bedroom of what works for both of you. And as a woman, genuinely offering a compromise that you can commit to and follow through with. And a good man will be there and say, okay, yeah, how do we make this work? That's when I talk with good men who are suffering in the bedroom and their wives are withholding sex, they're not being unreasonable in what they expect. A lot of good men will say, gosh, I would love it once a week or maybe even twice a week. But gosh, even if she had it once a month with me, that would be a game changer. So they're very fair, overly fair, and willing to compromise. And if you are a man who has a wife that's willing to compromise in the bedroom or other areas of the marriage, you are very, very fortunate, because most women won't, because we are so selfish. All right, we're going to get into the last question now. Another interesting angle. Number 3. My wife recently came to me and said she thinks she is asexual. We had a very brief discussion about it as she shut the conversation down and didn't want to talk about it. I have tried to have the conversation, but each time it goes nowhere. I don't know what to do with this. We have been together for 20 years, have 2 wonderful kids. Since she announced this, I cannot have sex with her. The feeling she has no need or want really leaves me in a terrible place. I am miserable and don't want to be like this for another 20 years. So how should I go about this? So bless you. That's a very challenging excuse that your wife came to you with. So it's amazing to me the excuses we will come up with and the stories we will create as women. And again, I want to say I am teaching and answering these questions in a broad sense of the principles and concepts that I teach on the channel. I have not talked to this man. I have not talked to his wife. So I'm going to answer this in the framework that I use, that this is an excuse. This is an excuse. So going with the theme today, didn't have what's the saying they have these days of like, this wasn't in my bingo card to talk about a BJ or a hand job so many times in an episode. However, I'm going to tie that into this question as well, that if your wife truly were saying, let's say she truly is asexual and is completely disinterested in sex, then you should be able to compromise with her of, okay, if your value is to stay married for your kids' sake or to stay true to your faith and your religion, and you're trying to work to find a solution, I would think a reasonable compromise in this, if you are asexual and don't want to have intercourse any longer, then is it reasonable that you do other acts so that I can have that experience in our marriage, because I'm not asexual. And it would be reasonable to have that conversation and ask if she's willing to compromise and be willing to give you a BJ or a hand job regularly in your sex life if she's not going to have sex any longer. What you will likely find is she's going to say no, because she isn't really asexual. It's another excuse to stop having sex, and she doesn't want to have sex with you. If she's not willing to compromise in that regard, then you can know it's an excuse to stop having sex. That there's no validity in what she's telling you and being asexual. It's an excuse and a way to shut it down, and something that you can't question and have to just accept. So this leads to another question of, why does a woman stop having sex after 20 years? With, from the way the man posed the question, a seemingly nice, reasonable man, why does she stop having sex after 20 years and 2 wonderful kids? Instead of saying, I don't want to have sex, I've lost interest, she's pulled an excuse out, asexual being the excuse, which is like other excuses we use as women, such as hormones or menopause or pain during sex or trauma or dryness, that we find a way to have an excuse in a story to stop having sex. But why after 20 years? Why after 20 years? And in thinking on this, is we feel entitled. As women, we feel entitled to stop having sex after 20 years because we feel we have put in our time. We have paid our dues, put in our time, and we shouldn't have to do it anymore. And what that means is, if a woman feels that way and feels entitled after 20 years to stop having sex because we've put in our time, means we've had sex out of total obligation and a chore. We've done it as an obligatory chore. And it's another way we can check out of the marriage. We no longer want to carry the burden and responsibility of sex with our husbands. We feel we have nothing left to give. And it's almost like we're retiring. After 20 years, and when a woman uses, say, an excuse like asexual, or an excuse like menopause, we feel entitled, and it's like retiring. I've put in my 20 years and I'm retiring now. It's like when someone works a job just for the sake of a paycheck and they don't like what they do and they're just biding their time until retirement. Is very much what women do with sex in a marriage. That after a certain number of years, then we can stop having it, which is very sad and very ridiculous that we feel entitled that should be okay, that there's a time we can just stop. I would imagine as a woman, and having faced these issues in myself, I can imagine us as women kind of like biding our time until menopause, because we know we can use that as the excuse to stop having sex and our husbands can't question it. And we see that into the future of, oh, at this time, I'll be able to stop. This woman just happened to use I'm sorry, I'm asexual. And it's kind of like, what if your husband came to you and he says, okay, you're asexual. Well, I'm going to be an a-hole. I'm coming out as an a-hole. I'm tired of being nice. Don't want to do thoughtful things for you anymore. And I'm just going to be an a-hole now. Essentially the same thing. I'm going to be asexual now. It's just an excuse. It's just an excuse to bow out and stop having sex. But yet a good man will still keep doing all the things he feels he needs to do to be a good husband or a good dad or a good provider. He's not going to come to you and say, I'm done working. I know we're not ready for retirement yet, but just not interested in it anymore. Or, I'm just not interested in cutting the grass and doing the yard work anymore. I'm done. That's what we do as women with these excuses, and why we would stop having sex after 20 years of marriage. So to the women listening, so you don't do this to yourself and you don't do this to your husband. It's really important that we work on our selfishness and entitlement, and to be able to consider what's important to our husbands. And I had said something before about we get to a point where we feel we have nothing left to give. And that's because we don't do anything to recharge ourselves and fill our cup. So we run on empty and feel we have nothing left to give. So it's really, really important as women, and how this relates to the bedroom, it's really important that we take time to do the things we enjoy and recharge, so that we have plenty to give in our responsibilities and commitments in our life, including sex with our husbands. You won't want to have sex if you're running on empty in your life. So it's really, really, really important that you do things you enjoy, that fill your cup and recharge you, and to have the character and integrity to follow through with having sex in your marriage, knowing it's part of a healthy marriage and part of the vows and commitment that we make, and that you don't have to have sex begrudgingly. If you have sex begrudgingly, you're going to get to a point where you feel you've put in your time and feel that you can just be done and retire, which is a very cruel thing to do to your husband and a cruel thing to do to yourself. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today. If you haven't, go check me out on YouTube, Rumble, and X. You can find the links in the description below to connect with me there. For those women listening who know you are the problem and want a path forward to take responsibility and change your own inner turmoil and unhappiness, I have a course for women called the Happiness Program, which is the solution to the unhealthy relationship you have with yourself and the issues and challenges you have in your life and your marriage. You can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. And for the good men listening who want a solution to take back the power you've unknowingly given away to your wife, I have a course for you too called the Marriage Rescue Course for Good Men Only, that teaches you how to rebuild your strength and confidence as a good man so that you can navigate the relationship with your wife in a healthy, constructive way. Again, you can find the link in the description below to apply for a free consultation with me. Thank you again so much for listening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.